Normally it's under video. Webinars now. Okay. Share screen, please. Oh, there it is. Come on. Stop video. Are you seeing the presentation screen?
I'm seeing your screen in your background. I'm not seeing a presentation screen yet.
All right.
Let's see.
Need to find where to share the screen at. There it is, share screen. Okay, it popped up.
Yes, share screen.
That one. And share. Okay. Put that over there, over here. All right.
There we go.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Ken Lyons, and I run the Central Florida Radio Scouting Program. So this is a short presentation on Jamboree-On-The-Air. All right, let me go to next slide. There we go. All right. Amateur radio has been a part of scouting since its formation in 1908 with the first troops. Amateurs started experimenting with radio well before the First World War in these early years. A number of troops, for example, the 1st Arundel and the 3rd Arundel, held transmitting licenses in the early 20s. Radio has been in scouting, which predates the BSA. And there we go. Baden-Powell is of the opinion that wireless was an excellent interest for the youth and encouraged them to take it up. He saw that it would be an essential form of communication for those in emergencies. Some troops even had mobile stations using their trek carts in addition to the equipment in their scout hut. Our program was restarted in 2018 and has quickly expanded. We are a program for education in STEM and showing the various technologies of the radio spectrum. Events are held nearly monthly with nearly 2,000 scouts on popular council weekends, all prior to COVID. All right, next. All right. Jamboree-On-The-Air, JOTA, is an international scouting and guiding activity held annually, which means this is both Boy Scout and Girl Scouts. It's started on the 50th anniversary of scouting in 1957 and devised by Leslie R. Mitchell, a radio amateur with the call sign of G3BHK, who went silent key in 2014. All right, I'll leave it on that page. In 1957, at a World Scouting Jamboree held in Sutton Park in England, with 35,000 scouts from 62 countries attending. For the first time at any World Jamboree, local radio amateurs installed and operated a large station under the call sign GB3SP. Scouts and leaders were allowed to visit so long as they stayed behind a little white fence with flower pots and kept the noise down. So it's more of an observation than for them to actually participate in at the time. Towards the end of the Jamboree, they were all a little sad, and someone remarked that it'd be nice to try and contact each other on the air. This was developed into an idea and trying to make contact on a specific day, and Les was asked to make necessary arrangements. Then Les got the visionary idea, why not run the event for the entire weekend and ask all radio amateurs throughout the entire world with an interest in the scouting movement to put their stations on the air at the same time and allow local clubs to intervene. So JOTA was born. This was his own choice of title. For Les, it described exactly what it was, a Jamboree-On-The-Air. In 1957, Les organized a weekend station with his local group in Reading, Berkshire, to test the idea. Using only a 40-watt AM transmitter, they made contacts all over the world, and it was obvious that the interest was such that it drew worldwide attention. It is now past history, and the event has gradually expanded to become the largest international event in scouting calendar. After 2014, over 1 million young scouts participated in this event each year. Les coordinated all JOTA activities in the United Kingdom up to 1988 and played an active role during the event up until very recently. In the introduction of JOTA handbook, he had a little section he wrote, while I certainly did originate JOTA, I feel that I've been showered with too much credit, for I just gave the boulder a push and it gathered from its own momentum as it rolled down the hillside. Must we not forget that thousands of individual radio amateurs who have each contributed time and effort to make JOTA enjoyable for those years. Silent key in 2014. There we go. So there's a short picture from our Jamboree. So JOTA is Jamboree-On-The-Air. In this picture here, we have KN4LSY, which is Larry, who's working on a local laptop there with a nice scouting youth. Now, Jamboree-On-The-Air doesn't have to be a very large event. It can be something as simple as just a local picnic table with a radio setup on there and 3 or 4 scouts that have been invited over from a local troop, all the way to these larger setups like ours, where we have thousands of attendees. So this particular one is from our COVID year. We were at 25% capacity. Normally we'd have almost 2,000 scouts. This one we had just under 700. So as you can see in the top picture there, we have our dining flies for shade and for rain. On the right side, you can see our lineup of workstations, computers, and transmitters. And the bottom left, we have our Morse code keys where they actually learn SOS. And on the right is a nice picture with Nicholas Butler showing off one of the stations and having a youth on the air. Next one. All right, here is the entire event for 2020. Everybody goes through the exact same process. It takes all of about 15 to 20 minutes for each of the youth to go through. Their very first station, if I can put this over here, there we go, is right here, is where they come in there, and we show them a variety of different technologies, move them on to the Morse code station where they all learn a little bit about Morse code's history, its use, and that it's still actually used, learn SOS, show them the Boy Scout Radio Merit Badge spectrum graph, which is from the FCC, and then we get them on the radio, either directly out here and outside, or have a few inside the comm trailers, which we get lent from the various clubs around us. All right. So here's some pre-COVID pictures, thus no face mask for them. So here's a better picture of the technology table. We actually start out with the band plan going all the way from CB radio at 27 megahertz and work our way up the frequency range, all the way up to 5 gigahertz. Almost everybody knows what 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi is, and not pictured is a 5 gigahertz drone, which was donated by the local drone club. All right, so as you can see, you can do JOTA just with a handheld or an HT, which makes it very easy. So here's somebody experiencing DMR for the very first time. Below is an outdoor classroom setting. As you can see, you can do Jamboree-On-The-Air or JOTAs or Radio Merit Badges just about anywhere. So in this particular one day, we're taking the Radio Merit Badge with the section there. All right, here's somebody working on Morse code. As you can see, they all get first hands-on experience. The goal is to make all the activities fun and enjoyable. One of our big things is competition. Just like everybody likes to have a nice, friendly competition and rivalry. So the games described here are the FRS Lego build game, where 2 scouts that can't see each other use a walkie-talkie to describe how to build something. So one of them builds a simple shape like this, and then has to describe to his partner through the radio how to copy it. And as you can see, they're not always perfect. The winners many times will win a set of FRS walkie-talkies at the end of the day for the fastest team. And in the bottom picture here is our Wi-Fi ARDF, where we hide transmitters throughout the council, and they learn to track them down. And at the end of the day, the fastest team wins a nice little trophy and a set of FRS radios. All right, let's check on, okay, no questions yet. That's good. All right, so this is the Wi-Fi scavenger hunt. We created this about 3 years ago in an effort. One of the issues we had is there's just not enough licensed amateurs, and this is something that local troops and adult leaders can actually do themselves. With $3 Wi-Fi transmitters, put them inside a box with a sealed lead acid battery, and go hide it in the woods, and it has over a 24-hour lifetime on it. We were contacted by the scouting organizations in England because they don't have enough licensed hams to be able to do full ARDF, and this was a perfect solution for them. For us, we like it for the younger cubs, where to them it's the hot and cold game. Does WBSA have a net to get scouts on the air outside of normal JOTA activities? We don't have a net, but what we do have is quarterly events. So we work with our local council. Every time they do a large cub camporee or scout camporee, we usually set up a booth similar to the fairgrounds. We're just another activity for them where we can get them exposed to the radios and to the different technologies. And the ultimate goal is to get them the Radio Merit Badge and get them licensed. All right. So for the younger cubs, we will hide a dozen of these along the roadways. The older scouts, we can hide them in the woods. And some of them, we actually zip tie them to a golf cart on the staff golf cart, which makes it a moving target for them, which makes it a little bit harder. All right. So ARDF, if you're not familiar with it, is amateur radio direction finding. This is a little bit more advanced. We aim this more for the regular scouts, where they use a handheld antenna, something similar to this, a Yagi antenna. And instead of actually having to do a hot and cold game where they have to walk towards the target, they can actually take a stationary position with a compass and a map and get bearings on the different signals. And two scouts paired off at a relatively distant area from each other can actually get two different bearings and triangulate where the box is at. So they can find a transmitter up to 5 miles away without having to take 10 steps. So they can do the entire Cub Scout event in about 5 minutes, whereas the Cub Scouts can take about 40 minutes to search for the different boxes by walking to them. All right. And let's go to the next one. Okay, blind sheep minefield. There we go. So some of us adult leaders who might remember this from Wood Badge days or from some other different trust building activities where you're blindfolded and somebody has to walk you through a maze. So we do something similar to this, except they have a FRS walkie-talkie. One reason we use FRS is so we don't have to deal with the licensing issues of having hams constantly nearby. For our council, we have maybe 20 hams available at any given time to do different events. So as many times as we can, we'll use the FRS. For larger events, we'll bring out the licensed radios. Working team, the ammo boxes. Those particular boxes you saw are from Harbor Freight, and they actually do sales every now and then for $2.99 a box. These are just little plastic ammo boxes. So that's the cheapest or lowest cost place we can get it. We work with a local battery wholesaler, and they actually give us the SLA batteries for about $20, so just over their profit margin. All right, Battleship. Now this is one game we tried with the Weeblos. They didn't do so well with it. So I'd aim this more for troop level and higher up. So we set up 5 different tables with a large grid, as you can see down here, and they would place paper battleships on the grid, and then we put a piece of plexiglass on top of it to lock them into place. That way we didn't have to deal with wind. So the goal is to make everything nice and fun. And this particular one, we actually use CB radios. So we had a donation from Amazon of a dozen 40-channel CB radios. Plugged them in. They each had their own 11-foot dipole antenna, and they were spaced out in a large field. So they could see each other from a distance, but they could never see each other's board. And by doing multiple games at the same time, it made the game much faster. And they actually got to sink other ships being unaware of it, because they have 2 boards. One is where their positions are at. Another one is where they're marking all of the enemies that they're either sunk or missed. All right, there's more complex ones. Lego puzzle. This is my favorite for the youth. This teaches communication skills directly. So again, they take, we have an entire bucket of 2 sets of identical Legos. We're actually called mega blocks. They're actually larger than regular Legos. They're made for toddlers. And we put them on 2 different tables about 50 feet apart. First person's told to get 3 to 5 pieces. They build something, and then using FRS walkie-talkie, they talk to their partner and describe how to build it, which is very hard for most people to figure out, saying take the 2x1 block, add a 3x1 this particular color on this particular edge. And they have about a minute or so to try and get that finished. And when they complete it, they go compare it and reverse it. So that way each person gets the same rolls. All right, it's a longer instruction. CW Morse code. So this is one thing we start out with everybody, is the definition of communications. So when they first come to us, we describe all the different technologies that they already know about, saying, hey, everybody's got a radio. How many have a radio in their pocket now? And immediately it's like everybody's got a cell phone. They already have 5 radios inside their cell phone. So we move them on to the Morse code keys, where they're on a nice little table. And their job is to learn a little bit about history of Morse code being invented in 1836 by Samuel Morse. And of course, there's controversy about him actually inventing it versus refining it. And they all learn SOS, 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots, and a little bit about its history, the Titanic. It's used in the Civil War as the first digital communications, where it took 4 seconds to get news from the battlefront, all the way to the White House, where it took 4 days by Pony Express. As they learn a little bit about speed. So this was the modern internet back in the 1800s and the first text messaging. Essentially, LOL is 150 years old for them. Moving all the way up to current jobs that still use it. For example, the Antarctic scientists still use Morse code with buttons inside their gloves, and some other deep sea divers and a few other professions still use Morse code when audible communication is not available. All right. Okay, this is a longer game here. So this one is, we were planning to do it last year and COVID hit. So we're getting ready to do it again this year in April. This is where we have usually Webelos or higher scouts. They will each have a telegraph key. And after learning SOS, they start learning the alphabet. Many of them already know how to do their names. In this case, we're actually going to give them full sentences. So we will actually have one of them type out an entire sentence. Their partner has to decode it, write it out, figure out the answer. So the questions are pre-known. They each have a list of what the questions are, so they can at least get it typed out. And then they send their reply back. And the goal is to have the fastest team, and they can do it 3 times in a row. So at the end of the day, they all win a set of FRS for the fastest team for that day. This particular one will be doing it by ranks. So it will be a Cub Scout event. So the Lions will each have a rank. Webelos, Lions, Buffaloes, Wolves, and so they'll be giving out 5 sets of walkie-talkies. And the goal on that is they're learning. For them, it's encrypting and decrypting. They're taking regular text and encrypting it into Morse code and sending it to their partner who has decrypted. For us, they're actually learning CW through osmosis and a lifelong skill. We find that some of the older scouts actually use their flashlights at night to send phrases back and forth, usually doing a game of manhunt, which is sort of like a tag or find man, where they use flashlights at night because they're not allowed to scream after 9 p.m. So they can continue their games later into the nighttime and use flashlights to signal if they need to go right, flank left. All right, moving on. All right, Jamboree-On-The-Air national numbers. So this is from February last year, because I haven't gotten the 2020 numbers quite yet. And of course, we expect the 2020 numbers to be low as from COVID. I think we were one of the few councils that still did JOTA this year. So as you can see, in 2019, there were, let me move this out of the box. I think it was 15,000 total. Okay, so 5,000 scouts and 9,000 visitors, so roughly 14,000 people in 2020. And going on to our numbers. So these are our numbers for our particular council, which is 26,000 scouts in 9 counties, including Metro Orlando, which give you an idea. So it's one of the larger councils in the country. So we had 766 participants. About half of those, or 3/4 of those, were youth. The rest were adult leaders, older scouts, because we actually use the older scouts for the different events. 2019 was our best year at 1,503. As you can see from our different numbers here. So this is our radio scouting events. So every time we do a quarterly or monthly event with the scouts, they all get added up. So at the end of the year in 2020, so even with COVID, we had events in January, February, March, and then we restarted in October, and all of that added up to 1,690 total scouts. Whereas compared to 2019, we had 12,300 for all of our events. If you look at our 2019 numbers for October, we don't do JOTA just one day, one weekend. We actually do it 5 times. That way each group, because they do what they call Cub Halloweens, are able to experience the exact same thing. So for the other weeks, it is a JOTA-like experience. And then on the actual JOTA day, that's the one that officially counts for us. But to all the different groups, they all learn the exact same thing. And it's constant turnover where we have brand new Cubs learning this for the very first time and getting a spark and just wanting to see everything. All right. So here you can see one of our older youth. So all of our Cub events usually have older scouts that act as a leadership role. And when possible, we have the older scouts actually helping out. So not only are we teaching the young scouts, we're teaching the older scouts. And by teaching, they actually learn things a lot better because they're having to do it over and over again. So we'll have a scout doing for 2 or 3 hours teaching SOS. So by the end of the day, they have it known by heart. There you go. All right, radio merit badges. So this is one of the metrics that are used by National to figure out on participation. So one of the goals for us is to try and get scouts to earn the radio merit badge, or at least to attempt it. Merit badges in general are a life lesson of experience. Whether you like it or you hate it, it teaches you something. So whether you were to take, I know they don't have an accounting one, but if you were to take the accounting one, so oh, great, you're bored, but at least you might have learned some numbers about it. So for example, the radio merit badge, it might find out that a person has a spark in science, technology. If not, it's something they can go through. We actually had a target back in 2019. We said we're going to aim for 200 merit badges in 2020, but prior to COVID. And because of virtual learning, we were able to do a class of 300 in October 2020, and a little over 200 and some passed that particular class. So we actually met our target even with COVID on there, which was interesting. All right, so a little bit about me. So again, I am the trustee for WB4SA, Central Florida Council. So we have 26,000 scouts, 9 councils. Recently, in Thanksgiving, I was appointed by the ARRL for Southeastern Assistant Division Director. In short, it just means I'm doing the same job except for multiple councils and multiple areas. So now I'm working to bring it to, here we go, 31 BSA councils and 14 Girl Scout councils, which is a little interesting. So now I'm bridging the line between the different councils and providing a program. Now, JOTA is a world program. It is aimed for Girl Guides, which is the Girl Scout equivalent around the world. And we also have the Boy Scouts. So this is one event where we can try and cross advertise and get them involved. And the few Girl Scout councils I've already contacted seem very interested in STEM. So just like any other youth organization, everybody wants to learn, they want to teach. All right, moving on. There we go. So here's a little bit about our area. So my particular state is Florida, and we have 5 different councils, and my council is right here. We're currently working with a couple other councils in the western and northern area, and the northern area actually has a very active radio council program, as well as Melbourne, which is part of our council, has a very active radio program. The one thing I find when talking to several hams is many times their local councils either have a non-existent program or it's no longer maintained. Our particular council camp actually stopped doing the radio merit badge because there was a lack of hams that were willing to support and come and do it. Our camp is about an hour away from the local clubs, and they would do or plan for a radio merit badge on a particular summer camp week. And if no ham showed up for the very last requirement of seeing a radio, they would have to bus them to the local fire station, which is 30 minutes away, to see an actual radio to meet the requirement. So a few weeks of a ham not showing up quickly killed that merit badge for future sections. So whenever you commit to doing something with the Scouts, it behooves you to follow through with it or contact it, because if you're not there to meet the requirement, a dozen or even 20 Scouts may not be able to get that merit badge, or the camp's going to have to do things to try and meet that requirement so that they can get that merit badge. Because the goal is we want everybody to be having fun and have a happy day. We don't want to say, oh, great, you got every requirement except this one. Now you got to go find a local club to meet this last requirement. All right. All right, so one thing we've been working on is to try and get a list of all the different councils in the country that actually have a active radio scouting program. It was staggering to find out that nobody has a centralized list of this. So we started building one about 1.5 years ago. If you go to radioscouting.us, you can start seeing all on there. I know there are thousands, there are 270 different councils out there, and I expect at least 100 of them actually have something going on right now. Even if it is a local ham that comes and does JOTA, Jamboree-On-The-Air, one day every single year, at least they would have something to fill their slot and know that, yes, they are doing something, or they're doing a radio merit badge consistently. I discovered there are several councils that were doing things, but nobody was keeping track of it. All right. So here's a few more councils from our list. And we actually have a reciprocal agreement with radioscouting.de, which is down here. So one of our goals is to do transatlantic communications, where they would plan something at 3 p.m. and then we'd start up at 9 a.m. because of the time zones. And then we could do communication back and forth for a short time. All right. Let's see. Okay, no more questions on that. All right. Let's see where this is. Oh, so we are still looking for amateur radio volunteers. So when we got our organization going back in October, we find out that we get calls constantly from various different troops and also from hams. Either it be a ham calling up randomly saying, I heard JOTA's happening, I want to help. Or worse, it'll be a troop saying, JOTA's in a week from now, we want to do it, what can we do? And trouble is, if they're out of my area, there's not much I can do other than refer them to the ARRL to find a local club in their area and hope they have a meeting quick enough or they can get in contact with somebody to do an event. So we are actually trying to get hams that are willing to, at a moment's notice, essentially, it's saying if a troop in your area needs to do a radio in a week, if you'd be able to do it. So the goal is to make a contact list of everybody in every zip code. My long-term goal is to actually have one ham in every zip code willing to set up a get-on-the-air station. It's just a mobile radio with a battery, enough that you can show a scout this is what a radio is, this is what an antenna is, this is what a coax is, and just show them the basics of it. It'd be really nice if we could actually do that in every single zip code, and it's a shame that we don't. I'd say less than 10% of the country is covered at the moment. So if somebody calls up in the middle of Kansas, all I can do is refer them to their local club and hope that somebody will respond in a timely manner. We've had times where somebody wanted a Jamboree-On-The-Air information, and the club finally gets back to them a month later because they had to hold a meeting and get the information out there, and by then the event's already over. All right. Yes, Jason McDonald. Yes, I've actually contacted you before on that. I will get with you later on that. All right, we want to go to this little guy. All right, so this is Edward Stokes, and a lot of you may not recognize him, but he saved amateur radio in the United States. Let me bring that up. There you go. All right, so this 14-year-old kid is W.E.D. Stokes from 1910. He was president of the Junior Wireless Club, and many of you might know its successor, which is the Radio Club of America, RCA. Until I actually got into ham radio, I had no idea that RCA actually meant Radio Club of America. So it's interesting that, to me, it was like, oh, Zenith, it's a company, but it actually was tied into radio. He was a young, very bright student, and he was very interested in radio communications. As you can see, he held patents related to wireless communication. In 1910, there were no commercial radio stations. We had no FCC, and there were between 25 and 40,000 amateurs at the time. Just after 1912, they had a act that killed off all of the shortwave frequencies. So we dropped about 90% of those, but they came back. At the time, though, the Navy said, hey, there's this brand new spark gap transmitter. And in 1910, they said they wanted to give all wireless communication to the Navy, which means there'd be no more broadcasts of any type because it'd become a military asset. And he got together and as president was sent to Congress. So he is the youngest person to testify before Congress until 1996. And his job was to plead the case of why wireless radio is important. It'd be similar to the military going to the drones and saying that all drones can never be used. It's only for military purposes, and having the outcrying of all the drone enthusiasts. So they were killing off an entire hobby, and his job was to go and save it. So it's interesting that how history works. All right, our potential program. So as you said, we had 12,000 scouts in our previous years. There we go. Let me try and move these so I can read this a little bit better. All right. So one goal right now we do is if you are in our council and you get a radio merit badge and move on to get a federal license, a technician class, general extra, we will give you a free UV82 or Bofang 5R radio to get you started. So our goal, sort of like anybody else, is saying, great, you've done all this effort, you've gotten a license, here's a gift to get you going. And of course, it's not gold-plated or something special, but it's a tool just to get them started, get them into the events. Right now, we're working on a Scout Handbox for the HF side to try and get them to move further. But one thing is we can train between doing classes at summer camp, 150 to 600 scouts in one summer camp. We can get them licensed. And as you can expect, if we had to buy 600 radios every single year, that gets quite expensive, especially when we're not charging the scouts anything. The summer camp fees only essentially just cover food and most other things. So they have outcrying when they have to pay $10 for shotgun shells for their or their bullets for the rifle shooting, when that's even more fun than radio. So, all right, so moving on. All right, so you can see we've expanded our program. So we're doing a great program. A lot of people see that. And now we're trying to find ways to help other councils. So prior to this, we were talking to different councils and saying, here's what we're doing. This is some of the different events we like doing. And the big one is getting Jamboree-On-The-Air on the calendar, making sure everything is forward. And Thanksgiving, I was appointed to this position, and all it's done is expanded my coverage area. So now I'm just talking to a lot of different councils in my area, trying to do the same thing, saying, do you have anything going on? What troops do you have? Are there any venturing crews that are already in it? There are several venturing crews that are into ham radio. Here are some projects that are currently working on. So we have a Scout Handbox. This is something special because just like our technicians, we give them a free Bofang radio, costs $20 to get that out, to get them on the thing. But trouble is, what happens when they become general or extra? They can't afford a $1,000 radio. So I equate this back to computers back in the 1980s, saying we want kids to get on computers, but their parents can't afford it, they can't afford it. How do we get them a $1,000 computer? So what we came up with is making a custom small radio. So it's a 50-watt HF, VHF, UHF, and has 2 SDR receivers built into it, controlled by a little Pi and a tablet front end. And our goal is to get it below $1,000. Right now, we're at the $2,000 mark for everything. So right now, as we work out vendors and try and get technology shrunk down, right now, the most expensive piece right now is actually the HF transmitter, which is $700. If we can get that down to about $300, we can actually make this less than $1,000. Another one is the Council Cube repeater. During JOTA and different events, we've always had issues of trying to reach somebody or reach other scouts. So we had the bright idea saying, hey, there's 270 councils. What if every council had a repeater and that we could actually interconnect them to each other, sort of like the East Coast reflector. So when Orlando transmits, Tampa or Texas can receive it and they can talk back and forth. So during regular campouts, summer camp, Jamboree-On-The-Air, scouts with their HT would be able to communicate with other scouts in other states. And by being on council properties, it would eliminate a lot of noise from third parties and regular hams and others, because it'd be pretty much limited to those areas. For example, our council camp is, I guess, 10 miles away from any possible ones. And by having a low enough power, we won't have to worry about too many strangers on the repeaters, make it a little bit easier. Youth outreach. So right now I'm reaching out to the different organizations, including Girl Scouts and a few others. Everybody has the same desire. Everybody wants to teach youth STEM and amateur radio technologies. A lot of people don't realize that amateur radio impacts every aspect of their lives. If they have a cell phone, at some point, amateur radio is connected to that. Satellite communications, weather broadcasting, is nothing more special than setting up a little SDR that can directly receive a NOAA weather map directly from the satellites. And it's just something simple you can do with your local troop in an afternoon, or do it on Jamboree-On-The-Air. Club outreach. So prior to reaching out to the different councils, I actually reached out to all the different clubs first, because councils are large behemoths. They don't want to spend any money. Well, it's just like any other organization, they can't devote volunteers, but they do want all the different programs. So what I do is I reach out to all the different clubs in their areas and essentially say, hey, if we can get 4 or 5 clubs in this little city in the middle of Kansas that are willing to support, if they can have a couple of volunteers, somebody come out and do different items, we can do a Jamboree-On-The-Air for your entire council. Then you approach council and say, hey, here's a group of people willing to set this program up. All you have to do is give them space at your next event. And that is one way of getting a new program started for a lot of people, because council sees this as great. We have an education opportunity that's not costing us anything. Amateur radio says, hey, we have all these new potential members. All we have to do is teach them something, give them the spark. And right now it's about 1 to 10% return rate on them getting licensed after the fact. And of course we have ham outreach. And that is where I'm directly appealing to individual hams. If you're willing to go set up a radio or show them a mobile radio, and you are willing to cover your entire zip code, we want to get you on a list. So that way, if there's any troops in your particular area that say, we need a ham to show us a radio, or we're working on a radio merit badge, but we need help, we have somebody we can refer them to instead of having to wait months for a club to follow back on it. All right. And this is the big one. I've talked to thousands of different hams around the country, and everybody has the same problems. They're all usually over 50, they're all gray hair, and they're all saying, we need youth. And the trouble is it's two-edged sword, because many of the same people say they don't want the youth, which is interesting. So we need the youth, but we don't want the youth. But to give you an idea on numbers, so here's an idea. So we have 2.4 million active scouts in 2019, and there are 161,000 ARRL members. And if we look at the FCC hams, so this is everybody that holds a license. So in 2018, there were 750,000 hams in the United States. So we did 7,000 radio merit badges that year. Here's just membership numbers. But if we can reach 10% or even 1% of all the different scouts, that's 24,000 scouts affected. So there we go. All right. So here was back to all the different sections people are needing. So we need more youth. Everyone has gray hair. The repeaters are dead. That's another common one. It actually depends on a number of repeaters. Here in Orlando, we have a lot of repeaters, and it can be challenging. Oh, we have some questions. Oh, okay. I'm going to read some questions right now. Is it, it can be challenging to ensure the scouts have someone to have a QSO with, and it's limited. Time for listening, DMR fusion. HF has been spotty lately, yes. Are you game for discussion directions available? Share via PDF or distribution. All right. Okay. Yep. Moving on. So back to this. So the repeaters are dead. Now in Orlando, we have maybe 25 repeaters. And I would say that for our area, I think we actually have too many repeaters. And that causes some of the deadness because it's like, which one do you use? So my personal ones, I only use 2 repeaters in the area mostly. Every now and then I'll scan around and pick the different ones. But my long-term goal is to get all patrol level scouts to actually get a VHF radio, because VHF radio and UHF radios work a lot better than an FRS quarter watt transmitter. We can give them a 5-watt radio that would help them whenever they're going out camping. They'd actually be able to maintain contact. So the long term is if every patrol leader actually had a VHF radio, suddenly we'd have tens of thousands of scouts that are now licensed. And when they're not on a camp out, they're still going to have that radio, which would lead them to using the repeaters to communicate with each other. All right. So scouting numbers. So scouts outnumber ARRL members 15-1 and outnumber hams 3-1. So our goal is if we can get 1% and then capture 10% of those, that's 2,400 scouts every single year that we could possibly license rolling this through. All right. All right. So one issue I ran into is, great, we got a dozen new scouts licensed this year. They want to go to a club and the club says, great, it's going to be $25 or $40 for dues this year. Now, if you're on an allowance of $5 a week, it's like telling an adult, great, you want to join this thing, it's going to be $1,000. You may change your mind about joining different things, especially if it is a regular club meeting. I don't know about you, but when you go to a club meeting, it's normally a business meeting, which is rather boring, especially for youth. What they want to do is play. So we have a thing in our Aries meetings where it is what they call a fun day, where youth and the adults actually go have fun by making JPO antennas, and doing different things. Things are active. So I'm encouraging clubs and ARRL that at least under 18 to either waive the dues or have them reduced enough where you allow the scouts and the youth to come into your organization, because it makes no sense to push to get them all licensed and then suddenly we close the door on them saying, no, you're not good enough. You have to pay more to be able to do any of the fun things that we offer. So that is one of my pushes for the different clubs. All right. All right, so the big one for hams, go to where the youth are at. One issue is a lot of hams that come to me say, oh, we wanted to do a JOTA, or we offered a Jamboree-On-The-Air this year, but nobody came to us. I don't know about you, but I'm not going to drive an hour to go do a 5 or 10 minute event at somebody's house or at somebody's club. But if you instead moved your event to somewhere where the scouts are at, you're more inclined. For example, a fair. So everyone's had nice World Fair, County Fair, State Fair. So somebody's not going to drive out to go see a vendor. If you put that vendor inside the fair, they're just going to pass by that booth, which at least gives them the opportunity to see where you're at. So councils are constantly doing events, which is essentially our fairs. Our goal is to have as many as we can. So if we have one large event every single month, similar to your meetings, where we can get thousands of scouts all together to participate, have fun, do different things. For example, they have cotton candy. Another one is metal detecting, where they just throw a bunch of coins out in the middle of a sand pit and have the youth using a metal detector to go find the coins, and they get to keep the coins that they find, which makes it interesting and fun. So they're not going to spend all day to go do that particular activity, and they're not going to drive out to go do that one activity. So by bringing all these smaller events, including ourselves, to the scouting activities, that's one way of driving traffic to us and trying to get our message out to the youth. Keep it interesting. Don't do the exact same thing over and over. So we started out doing the Morse code and setting up a small radio, and we keep expanding it. Each year we keep adding more. So this year we added DMR. We're working on putting in mobile radios and go boxes and actually spreading it out throughout the camp. to try and show them all the different things. We have a 60-foot tower, which we use for our HF and for beam antennas. And we have some small, simple dipoles and even some 5 little QSO radios that they can get on. So the goal is to vary the items you present, so that way you're not presenting the exact same thing. So every time, so even if somebody says, oh, I did that last year, but when I come to it this year, it's going to be something different, or at least they'll learn something new. All right. Can you repost the radio games or make them available? Yes. The radio games, everything you see here is actually on our website. If you go to radioscouting.us/CFC, or you'll see our little thing on there for Central Florida Council. So there is a thing on there for flyers and events. You actually see a PDF that already has all the different radio games, and you actually find part of this presentation already in there, because this is based on an earlier presentation for a youth forum. All right, I am a ham and a Weeblo den leader in Georgia. I would love to set up a station for JOTA. When is the event? Are there specific requirements expected of JOTA station? Yes. Now, all Jamboree-On-The-Air is October, the 3rd weekend of October. So that is a date set in stone around the world. Now, the one thing is the times aren't set in stone. So that way, it essentially starts out with Australia and the eastern areas all the way to Hawaii, which will be at the very end. So most people aim for the middle. In our case, we always aim for that Saturday. That way we have people before us and people after us to make it a little bit easier. You can go to k2bsa.org or .net. They both go to the same place. And they actually have information on how to set up a particular JOTA station and some of the rules and guidelines. But it all boils down to providing a safe environment. The same rules that apply to Scouts apply to us. As far as 2D leadership, you're trying to provide equipment to them easily. What we did for COVID restrictions, because a lot of you might still have this issue, is all of our telegraph keys we actually put inside a plastic bag and taped it down to the table. That way all we had to do is just wipe the bag. That way you didn't have to worry about parts. We did the same thing for handheld microphones. We actually had a long plastic bag. It was made for candy, so it was a really long particular bag. We'd slide that over there and they'd use that. Just make sure it doesn't crinkle or make noise depending on the type of material you get. And that was one way of trying to do some protections for that. All right, Avid CW op. The counting moved to a more acceptable, let's see. All right, that's another big issue. A lot of people say, I want to help out Scouts, but I'm not registered. I don't have a background check. I don't have all this other stuff, and it's gonna be a hassle. The nice thing with Scouting is you don't have to have the background check to be able to do a presentation. That is the goal of the troop leaders and for the other adult leadership in there. To be an adult leader with Scouts, you have to go through the background check and be registered with the local council. However, if you're just what they call an expert or a radio merit badge counselor that's assisting, I should say the radio merit badge counselors, they do get vetted and get background checked, but you can be an assistant. So for example, if we're setting up a different event at a camp, we can invite the local clubs and it'd be on them to ensure that the people are, for example, don't have any felonies, things like that, would be qualified to be there. But the main thing is the people running the event would have the background checks, but everybody else, their assistants, wouldn't have to. So you don't have to be registered to be an assistant for these. Statement, Still City make the regular outreach to Scouts in Pittsburgh area and to lodges. All right. I can cover as many zip codes easily. Okay. So it looks like somebody already has different networks out there. So, and one, how should I put it this? One thing I found is there is, for an organization, for a club that has communication, we don't seem to communicate very well with each other. I think that applies to a lot of aspects of it. But for us, at least in Scouting, is reaching out to all the different ones. Like I said, as I was discovering, North Carolina, Atlanta, they have very active programs that they're very popular in the local areas, but nobody knows it's going on. And it'd be very nice if we can interconnect all these different ones out there. So that's the appeal and the request, is to try and reach out to as many clubs and to as many councils and say, what do you have going on, number one? And number two, do you need help to expand it or make it further? And three, let's try and work together so we can try and create common events. It'd be nice if we could do more than just JOTA once a year. Our particular council, we're doing monthly events. It'd be nice if we could actually reach out to other councils on the same monthly events if they have something going on at the same time, or they have a local troop meeting at the same time. All right. All right, so let's see where we're at on time, because I was not keeping track at all. There we go. All right, 40 minutes. So we have some time for Q&A. So is there any other questions? Now is the time. All right. Let me go back to one area here. So I'd like all of you to reflect on this just to show that. So a lot of ARRR members and a lot of hams don't realize the number of organizations that are inside scouting. This is just the BSA. If you were to add some of the other programs on there, you could easily double these numbers or get close to it. There we go. All right. So scouting units now, how many clubs are there in the country for ham clubs compared to how many youth units? There are 100,000 youth units throughout the entire country. That's a lot of different troops in your area. So you might have one club, for example, the Orlando club right here. We might have, I'm trying to think, I think we have 400 and some different troops in the surrounding area. That is a lot of youth to be supported by one club, but it's also a large pool of people that can help assist you. All right, any other answers? Okay, all right, let's back up to the games. Everybody loves the games, and that is the highlight of Jamboree-On-The-Air is you want to get them on the air as much as possible, but you only have so many radios. So how do you keep them busy while you're waiting for them? And that's where we have the games. So that's one reason we're multifaceted. We have several helpers. So while we have 2 or 3 scouts on a radio talking to somebody and not trying to step on each other, the other scouts are waiting in line, or in this case, actually playing different games with each other to make it easier. So for example, they have the Morse code key where they're actually learning SOS, learning their name, getting more information about that. We have the younger youth learning about the Lego build. So again, this is a communication game. And for this, their first time on radio is usually this before they even get to the handheld. So they're actually learning how to push a key for a push to talk. They're learning about how to describe something that somebody can't see. You can't just say, take this block and that block and put them together. Well, describe how to put them together. Describe what color the block is, what size the block is, which direction are they going. So as you can see, doing them in flat makes it a lot easier in one way. All right, the scavenger hunt is one of the funnest ones, and a lot of adults love this because this is a time killer for them. They just ate, they really don't want to be running around too much, so they can take, for the adults, they take a leisurely stroll going down different courses, and for the scouts, they just run ahead burning off energy. But there's one way that adults can take at least a relaxing time as they walk around the park digesting while their youth continue ahead running around. All right, are there any other questions? All right, chat. Oh, there we go. I have a whole other section here. All right. Greetings from the Philippines. Greetings from, it looks like a Great Britain, G8IXK. Okay, several greetings, several greetings, several greetings. There we go. I heard the amateur operating strip is discontinued. Is that true? Yes. The amateur operating strip, which is normally on our side shoulder, was discontinued a number of years ago. If you can still find it, you can still purchase it and use it. So just like everything in BSA, once it's issued, it's legally allowed to be worn. So for example, if you have the really old 1980s uniform, you can still wear it so long as everything else ties into that uniform's generation or era. So if you have the amateur operating strip, I know I have a dozen or so. I ordered a bunch before they discontinued it. But just search on, you can do eBay, and some of the different council stores still have them in stock. They just sitting on the shelf collecting dust. So if you can find them, go ahead and buy them and wear them. Any chance of getting a copy of your presentation? Yes. Our club works with scouts during JOTA regional camporees and radio bear badges. Okay, that's nice. Pics of the gallery, great. All right. What have we done in JOTA? Recommended list of equipment. Okay, used for ARDF. So what we did for the ARDF is for our Wi-Fi ones, we actually went to Goodwill and different places and picked up those old Linksys routers, those nice little cheap routers that we can get for $2 or $3. A more ambitious person in Melbourne actually went out and got dedicated Wi-Fi chips. They were able to get them essentially just as a $2 chip from DigiKey, and were able to build their own. The goal is just to have some type of transmitter and some type of power on there. All right. And several different things on there. All right, so the big one is youth. So again, during COVID, a lot of things scaled down. We restarted in October. During that time, we were able to do online virtual ones. The hardest thing for doing a radio merit badge course online is the very last requirement, which was have a QSO. And what we ended up doing was Zoom sessions. So I spent 300 hours on Zoom with 5 to 6 scouts at a time and having them contact each other using Zoom and simulate a radio. And that was one way we were able to get around that. That's probably the hardest thing. The scouts that did not make that, and I think there was about 40 or so that couldn't schedule a Zoom session, didn't get to it, had to go to a local ham club or work out something differently. We actually ended up having to do special hours because we had a few scouts in Japan that didn't line up with our time schedule. So we actually had to do a special session just for them to be able to continue their requirement there. All right. Is my understanding that doing an ARDF Foxhunt can replace the requirement for doing a QSO? I'd have to check the requirement. It is spelled out in there where you have to do A, B, C, or D, and you have to continue the entire. So if you started out on path A and you did everything but one requirement, and then you want to jump to, I think B is for broadcast, I think C or D is the ARDF. So you'd actually have to do everything under C, D, or F. So whatever is that entire requirement block is what you'd have to fill out. So just refer back to the requirements, but you can't just take a requirement from another section and swap it in for another one. That'd be something you have to get with BSA National or your council, but the easiest is just to do virtual QSOs if you need that requirement. All right, well, that's going to conclude this session. I hope everybody enjoyed. You can reach me at radioscouting.us.